G'day there, you're watching the Aussie BIM Guru and you've reached part 7 of my Python quick tip series. Today we're going to be looking at another type of statement, which is the TryExcept statement. We've just looked at the if statement. This one's a little bit different. So the TryExcept statement is essentially built to handle errors, because errors will happen in your script quite a lot, especially if you're putting something together where the user defines an input and they don't necessarily understand the data types they should be using. So they can be great for building up error messages or passing things beyond a certain point if an error occurs. A good example of using or the need to use an error catch is if we do just a simple addition. You can see on the left where it's okay, we're adding a float and an integer together, and we know that Python can rationalize this into a resultant float. But if we catch an error, you'll notice that we're actually adding a float to a string, and we know that we can't do this. We can add a string to a string to concatenate, and we can add reals and integers, but we can't cross these two data types together. So if this was a certain point in your script, you generate an error, and if you were passing some data forward, it would essentially stop your data flow. So it's important to catch this using something like a try and except. Now we can use an if statement to try and catch all the various conditions that could occur and use an if catching all these conditions, but you can see just how many statements I've had to use to really protect this formula. One of the statements is that I have to check that I've got at least one float and integer at the same time between the two variables I'm adding, and also I've got one where I check if I either have no strings or both strings. Then I have to use some ors and some ands to build a resultant like it's okay to go sort of boolean, and use an if to protect it. But that's so clunky, and there's other types of errors that could occur that won't get picked up by this. Like what if I'm generating a list instead of a string? I haven't got anything checking if there's a list. So in this case we have to be really careful. So try and except works a little bit like an if else, but instead the boolean is really just whether you're generating an error by trying something. And if it's okay, it's okay. And if it's not, then there's an except condition where you can put in what happens if an error occurs as a result of what you try. So it looks a little bit like this. So the syntax is try, colon, and then an insert or a tab, and what you're testing. And this can imply an outcome. So you can put like a print function in here, and that's what the TryExcept will do. But if an error occurs, any type of error, not just a type error, not just an IO exception, there's all sorts of errors Python can generate. It's just any sort of error, it will do the unless or the except with a semicolon and a tab. So it sort of protects this part of it, and it gives you the option to say, maybe you're going to generate a boolean that tells the script to stop, to not go any further in like an if statement if an error happens. You can see here we've got an unhandled error in this particular example because we're adding a real and an integer. In this case, we're not actually, if you look carefully, the integer is not an integer, it's actually a string. So you can see in this case we've got an error, we've got a float and a string, and the script can't continue. So you can see here that a try and an except will handle this. So in the try case, we're just printing the sum that worked. But if it doesn't work, then instead we print a message that says the inputs must be real, integer, or string. And you can see as a result, we instead get a warning telling us something's happened. So I've just got a cat climbing on my computer here. Cheeky bugger. Anyway, back to it. So you can see in this case, the try and the except has handled the error. We can also add two extra conditions to our try except. One of them is called else. We've seen else before, but in this case, else basically says if there was no error, also do this. But if there is an error, we can't do anything. So, and also finally, it says either way, we do this, even if there's an error. So if you check this example here, it's a little bit hard to see because it's a bit small, but I've added an else that says the script was successful. So if there's no error, we get a message telling us that it worked. And finally, it just says the script was run. Even if there's an error, it was run. On the left, we're adding something that works. So we get the result from the try. We get the else, which was telling us the script was successful, and we get the finally, which says the script was run. In the case of the error, we get the error message from the except. So we get inputs must be real, integer, or string, and we also get finally, just telling us the script was run. So this is how you can sort of error-proof your scripts. So hopefully that helps you better protect your scripts and how they work, and learn a bit more about error catching, and learning about what sort of errors to anticipate when you write a script. In the next part, we're going to be doing something that's quite popular in Python, which is looking at loops in particular the for and the while loop. These are very useful in Python. Basically, iteration, if you've heard that before, is more or less what this refers to. So I think this will be a very useful video coming up. So thanks for watching today, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Take care.